All right, we are live. This is Armin Navabi with Atheist Republic, and we are with.
Abdul Hanan. I am an ex-Muslim from Pakistan living right now in Canada. I am an open critic of Islam, with a deep history with Islam, been a really practicing Muslim from about the age of 15 up till now, about 7, 8 years. Uh, I left Islam recently after a year of research. I found out a lot of questionable material in there. Uh, I used to give khutbas, like sermons in mosques. I used to lead prayer. I used to give the call to prayer, that is the azan.
Oh,
Uh, I converted two people to Islam. So I
wow,
have,
you were serious, eh?
yeah, I was hardcore. Like I was always dressed according to the sunnah, like like trousers above the ankle, long beard. It'll come out the other side of my fist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's how you measure. You have to like that's is that the correct version? Like it has to come because we were told as long as you have some beard, like as long as you're not clean shaven, you're fine. But you're is that sunnah that it has to come out of? It has to be longer than that.
yeah. From what I know, at least the Hanafis say that it has to be at least one fist. But then
Right.
there's other ideologies like the Salafi ideology that are more literalists, and they say that you cannot cut your beard at all, and hence sometimes you see some people, mostly in the Middle East, with beards as long as 2, 3 feet.
Wow. But so how were your parents this religious, or how did you become so religious?
Um, I was about 15, and just started looking into Islam, religion. Why am I a Muslim? So I became practicing first, but I didn't do my research. And then I just started propagating the religion. My family isn't too religious. They do pray 5 times a day. My mom does, uh, but they still listen to music. They still go to concerts. They still watch movies. So they're not super conservative.
Right. So, what were they? That's how I became very religious before doing my research as well, and then doing my research brought me to atheism.
Yeah.
But did your I was freaking out my parents when I became very religious. Were your parents kind of like weirded out by your extra being extra religious
Oh yeah. Initial reaction was that they wanted to disown me. They didn't want to talk to me. They were
for being
shocked.
religious?
Oh, sorry for becoming an
No,
atheist.
at first, no. I'm just saying. I'm not when you became an atheist. At first, when you became very religious, was that
Oh,
weird for them, or was that like, oh, our son is like such a good boy now, like, or something like that? Like, which one?
yeah, they were happy. They'll actually use me as an example for people. Like, look at this
Uh,
boy. He's so nice. He's so pious, so righteous. And then people will look up to me, like in high school, throughout, like any school function or any meeting. I'd be reciting the Quran in the mornings. Actively propagating religion in schools. So I was like all the teachers, all the people around me, the way society is in Pakistan, they appreciate if you're more religious.
I was the opposite. My parents were freaked out by by me becoming religious, and they were relieved when I became an atheist.
Oh,
But what happened? So you're saying so you said when you became an atheist, what happened then with your parents?
my parents were like really shocked. Their initial reaction was like, you've been possessed by a jinn, which is a mythical smokeless uh, being made out of fire in the Islamic tradition, kind of like
Yeah.
demons. They said that don't talk to us. Uh, my parents initially threatened to disown me and stuff. Uh, it was hard to go through.
Hmm.
Uh, I lost a lot of friends. I lost about 150 friends within a week. Really, really close classmates. All my relatives, even my aunts, uncles, cousins, all unfriended me or blocked me. So
It was
it was equivalent to losing everything. Yeah.
Are your parents in touch with you now, or have they still? Are they still?
Over time, things have gotten better, and yet I talk to my mom and my dad regularly now. But there was a really rough patch in between.
Mm,
But it's way better now. I
mm.
just tell them, you know what? You're still my family. I still love you. I'm still your son. Let's just put our differences aside. I mean, you can keep your religion to yourself. Let's talk about other things.
By the way, that's not very Islamic to say that you're possessed by a jinn, because only Iblis is the only jinn that could make you do bad things. The other ones don't have that power, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, um, anyway, I found you on Reddit ex-Muslim, right?
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
saw people were screenshotting some of the, because on Facebook you keep screenshotting some verses in the Quran, and you or the Hadith as well, right?
yeah.
Sometimes, and then you criticize it, and your analysis is very in depth, right? And you have a lot of knowledge, and because you were, I think because you were also very religious, you have much more, like I know a lot of ex-Muslims that don't know the Quran and the Hadith as some other ex-Muslims, but you have a lot of deep understanding of these verses, right? By the way, when you became an ex-Muslim, what was it? Do you have like any, was it a gradual path, or was it like a moment of realization? Was it the Quran and the Hadith that made you leave Islam, or was it argue no lack of evidence for God? Like, is there anything that specifically made you decide to leave Islam?
It was definitely a gradual process, lasted about a year. Um, so I was hanging out with a lot of non-Muslims as I'm living in Canada. So, I mean, they started asking a few questions, why do I have my beard this long? So I told them I'm a Muslim, and a bunch of other things. So uh, they criticized some aspects of Islam, and the criticism was really good. So I was like, oh, I'm going to answer them. And my intention was I'm going to make them Muslim. But the more I looked into the matter, searching for an answer to their queries, I found out that, hey, this is also different. This is weird. I found out a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. And then, over the course of a year, like I watched both sides, criticism of Islam, uh, pros and cons, uh, tried to get explanations, but none of them were satisfactory. One of the most important things was the change in perspective of how you look at things. Uh, Coming from Pakistan to Canada, you get a whole different worldview. Uh, Opinions are being exchanged, so that really helped a lot
Right.
in the
So you
whole.
don't live in a bubble kind of anymore. You're
Yeah,
being exposed
exactly.
already. Well, but it does take some serious open-mindedness from your part. Like if you lived in a bubble for a long time, even after you step out of it, sometimes it's hard for you to reconsider old beliefs. So for you to even be open-minded to reconsider, that's pretty open-minded.
Yeah.
Was there anything specific that like you remember from in that you found problematic? Like, I know there must be more than one, but is there any examples of something that you found problematic?
Well, I've been watching quite a few documentaries about this one thing in Pakistan was Amongst the Believers. It was on Netflix, and it's about these clerics that are propagating Sharia in the capital of Pakistan and ended up being a military conflict and whatnot. That kind of opened my eyes that, hey, this is exactly what Muhammad did. This is exactly what Muhammad was striving for. And then I had like, wait, this this doesn't sound right. This can't be the religion of God. Nobody wants to live in a society, where uh, Sharia law is being implemented in a like hands are being chopped. A lot of graphic violence in that documentary. Another one was Saudi Arabia Uncovered. Those kind of opened my mind uh, as well.
All right,
But
I'm
there was,
hearing my mouse clicks in the speaker. Is there, it's okay. Is there any way to reduce the echo? But that's okay. But anyways, um, so we wanted to talk about like one thing that you wanted to talk about in here is some verses, the Quran, right?
yeah,
And
definitely.
how there are some verses. I heard about this, after I became an atheist, and I was very
Mhm.
shocked that actually, because I thought like, yeah, Quran, is obviously made up, but one thing I still believed as an atheist was that it never changed, right?
Mhm.
But then I learned about Osman and how he burned all the copies that
Yeah,
were contradictory and some stuff. I like, holy shit, this is, that was weird for me. Like, it's obviously there's no contradiction in the Quran if you burn everything that is contradicts it, right? So
yeah, definitely.
that's cheating. But yeah, but can you tell us a little bit about that and your perspectives on it?
Yeah, the compilation of the Quran is very ambiguous because everything we know about Islamic history comes through the hadith material or hearsay, because in that time there wasn't a lot of written material. Once you go into the text, the hadith itself, uh,
Right.
you find so many discrepancies, like in the original Quran or what was revealed to Muhammad. There's verses missing, there's total chapters gone missing, there's hundreds of verses missing. Some very important verses have gone missing as well, like the verse of stoning. Uh, that didn't make sense. And
But
then I
how do you
started,
know that? How do we like? What is the evidence for? Because as a child, we always told the Quran has never changed, never even one dot in the Quran. First of all, they told us even one dot, and later we learned that actually the dots were not even part of the original Quran.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so I don't know how could yeah. So, but they told us that even one dot in the Quran has never changed, and God has protected the Quran. But then we learned actually like there was a goat that actually ate part of the Quran, right? And went
exactly, yeah,
yeah, it went missing because of the goat.
yeah.
So so just for the people that don't know the difference, you have the Quran, right?
Mhm.
And then you have the Sunnah, which
Yeah,
the sources of that is the Hadith. So the
yeah,
Quran is supposed to be directly the word of God, and the Hadith is things people say that Muhammad said or did, and
mhm.
we're supposed to follow the way of Muhammad. So these two are the main sources of Islamic teaching,
Yeah,
with the Quran being having more authority, but the Hadiths having more sources of more guides of what to do than the Quran, right? There's more things, there's more Hadiths than there is Quran, correct?
yeah, yeah.
All right.
One issue I found was the Quran itself states over and over again that it's a book which the verses in itself are fully explained, right? But the problem is most of the Quran is it can't be understood. The context cannot be understood without the hadith to supplement it.
Right.
Like you don't even have basic tenets of faith covered in the Quran itself. Like how do you pray? It doesn't tell you how to pray. It's
Right.
in the hadith. How many times do you pray? Because the hadith say 5 times. The Quran only mentions three. Uh, the sequence of actions you perform in Hajj, and a lot more uh, interesting things like the zakat, the percentages, etc. Uh, so you don't find any of that in the Quran, right?
Right.
So
So without
that
the Hadith, the five from the five pillars of Islam, four of it would not make any sense without the Hadith. So for
exactly,
yeah, so exact. So the people for people that want to just dismiss the hadith, well, nothing. Well, there's nothing of most of what we know about Islam would not even exist without the hadith, right?
exactly.
Right,
And the problem with hadith occurs is they originate about 150 years after Muhammad. That's 15 decades later.
right,
The first books that were ever written about Muhammad were called the Maghazi books, that were just about the wars Muhammad fought, just bloodshed and war. That was around 100 years after Muhammad. The first book written about the life of Muhammad was Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, uh, which was consequently lost and only survives through the edited notes of his student Ibn Hisham. That was written about 150 years after Muhammad.
wow,
And the first mention of Hadith, Imam Malik's Muwatta, was about like 150 years after Muhammad's death.
right,
Other major collections, the most authentic books of Hadith in Sunni Islam that are taken second to the Quran in authenticity, Bukhari and Muslim, were between 200 to 250 years after Muhammad's death.
right. So just to be clear, there are six hadith books that are considered sahih,
Yeah,
or what in Sunni Islam is considered as true and as authority, like as complete. Everything in it is the way, the way Muhammad lived and what Muhammad said, and the way they say it's sahih or authoritative is that they found that the chain in which it goes back to Muhammad. So they have the chain written between each sentence. This guy told this guy, this told this guy, told this guy that Aisha said that Muhammad said this, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why they say this is sahih is because all the people in this chain are supposedly good, trustworthy people, which is not the best way of like that would not pass in academia today, but apparently that's the best for them. That's 100% guarantees that this is a true saying of Muhammad, right? But
Hmm.
actually, if you go to the end of the chain, which like a lot of them is with Aisha, I actually don't even trust Aisha
Yeah.
because she was, after Muhammad died, she became very political. And if you look at her story, a lot of the hadiths that she came up with seems to match what she wanted to be true and worked
Exactly.
out for her, right?
Yeah.
So even the first chain in is not, I don't think it's trustworthy. I don't even know who the rest are, and I don't know how they managed to figure out that all of them are trustworthy, right?
Yeah. Like one thing to note is the chain is extremely long in certain cases. There's like 25 to 30 people in the chain
Wow.
sometimes. And the problem is when a hadith is graded sahih, the traditional sense is that these are the literal words of Muhammad.
Muhammad, yeah.
But once you go in the hadith literature, you find sahih hadith contradicting each other all the time.
Right. Even the Sahih ones.
Even the
Not
sahih hadith contradict all the time.
okay. Okay. But honestly, if you have 20 people between the Muhammad and the person that actually wrote it down, it's almost guaranteed that you have like the Chinese whisperer game going. Like it's almost guaranteed that this is not the word of Muhammad anymore, isn't it? Like I don't know. Like I don't know how you could determine that 25 dead people were all trustworthy. How do they manage? Like how do they manage to? I don't understand. Like is how do you measure someone's trustworthiness, right? So especially since they're not here anymore.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah, go on.
the scholars have written like these huge books called the books of Rijal, which is literally biographies or commentaries on people's lives. That
Right,
oh, this guy lived here, he's a trustworthy guy, his memory is good, and they go into a lot of detail about personal life. And I don't even understand how can they gather so much information about every person's life and then critique someone's memory or somebody's piety,
right.
somebody being a liar.
Someone's pirate. Like I know even people that I know personally. I don't even know if 100% of like these are people that they never even met, right? But okay, but so now people now understand that what the hadith is. Hadith is people stuff that people wrote way after the Quran was canonized. The Quran was not canonized during Muhammad's life even itself. The
Hmm.
Quran was not even a book when Muhammad died. The Quran was just people have memorized a whole bunch of verses, and it was not all of it wasn't written down, and the parts that were written down were like not in one place. So
On bones and parchment and
bones and
leather.
parchment. So when Muhammad died, the first Khalifa, his Abu Bakr, he didn't turn it into a book. The second Khalifa, Omar, he didn't turn it into a book. It was Uthman, the third Khalifa. He decided to get all of them together, and he
Hmm.
recognized that, okay, shit, there's contradictions, right?
Yeah,
And he was the one that decided which ones are true and which ones are not true, right?
yeah,
And he burned all of them. So it was basically Osman's decision. He might, like, even if this was the word of God, like we don't know, like he might have burned out the actual word of God and kept
yeah,
something that was false, right? And he actually got Aisha to come and change. Aisha actually came and changed some of the verses, didn't she? Right? She sat down with Osman and she was like, "No, this is wrong. This is what Muhammad said," which is makes Aisha actually one of the authors of the Quran, which is right, right. And some parts of it that Omar actually remembered some parts that didn't make it because the stoning part, right? Like
yeah.
you're supposed to stone adulterers,
Hmm.
but that part didn't make it in the Quran, but Omar, the second Khalifa, he remembered it. And he was like, no, I remember this being part of the Quran. So he stoned adults, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Uh, the problem arises when you look at the hadith literature, right? There's so many verses that have gone missing, and I'll share a few right now. I'll just
Okay.
kind of pull a reference and share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see. Okay, I'm going to have to not talk so that your screen shows.
Okay. So this is one of the verses that's gone missing or was used to be in the Quran but is not found there. It clearly mentions that there were verses
Can you
about
zoom in?
breastfeeding.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah, definitely. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's much better. And to be clear, this is a hadith.
Yeah, this is a hadith. It's in Sahih Muslim, which is the second most authentic hadith book, and all the narrations in this book are considered 100% authentic by traditional scholars. Uh, so here, Aisha again mentions that there's verses that are 10 sucklings, and then there's reduced to 5, and now it's no longer found in the current Quran. And let's pull a few more.
And
There's this,
just to be clear, this is one of the Sahih hadiths. That means that this is considered true by all Sunni Islamic schools of thought. Is considered to be true, right? And
yes,
Shias are a little bit different, but they also share some of. Is this accepted by Shias as well? Because I know, for example, Shias have Nahj al-Balagha, which Sunnis don't, right? But I
yeah.
don't know how many of these 6 books are considered Sahih by Shia scholars.
Shias actually have, I believe, totally different books on hadith, and their criteria for grading hadith sahih or weak is different compared to the Sunni. They don't trust some of the narrators that the Sunni scholars do. So a lot of the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, the Shias outright reject, and they have their separate own collection of hadith.
Right. Okay. What? So somebody is asking, how many years was the collecting? Like, how many years? I think after Muhammad died was the collection of the Quran done.
The first collection of the Quran was done under Abu Bakr's reign. That was quick, about 5 years after Muhammad's death, if I'm not mistaken. What happened was there was a battle of Yamama where a lot of the memorizers of the Quran had died, and Omar feared that the Quran's going to get lost, so he convinced Abu Bakr to compile the Quran into one place. After that was done, uh, about in the time of Uthman, I was the third caliph of Islam. Uh, he
So,
was
so Abu
notified.
Bakr started it, but he didn't finish it. Osman finished it.
Yeah, so they
Right.
did have a physical mushaf or a copy in the time of Abu Bakr as well that was given to one of the wives of Muhammad for safekeeping. And in the time of the third caliph of Islam, that is Osman, he was notified that different people in different areas of the Islamic Empire, because it was constantly expanding, they were reciting the Quran differently, right?
Right.
So Osman came up with the idea that to unify the Muslims, he took all the other Qurans from all the other cities and literally burnt them, and then had a committee headed by Zayd bin Sabit to recompile the Quran completely from the copy of Abu Bakr and uh, verses that he can find elsewhere and verses
And
on.
how many years was that after Muhammad's death?
Not exactly sure, but that'd be around
I
20
could look
years
that up.
after Muhammad's death.
Tell us about what you're showing us now, and I'll look that up.
Yeah. So you can see here that this narration mentions that Omar, who's the second caliph of Islam, tells that Ubay ibn Ka'b is one of the reciters of the Quran, had much more in his copy of the Quran than the final copy that Osman arranged. And he said that we leave out some of what Ubay recites because there's this concept of abrogation in the Quran, or what they say is cancellation or substitution of verses, where Allah basically cancels out a verse, makes people forget it completely, and then substitutes it with another one. The concept itself is very peculiar, is weird, because why would God want to change his mind over and over again? And some of the abrogations don't make sense, which we'll go into later. So there were verses in the Quran that used to have mentioned breastfeeding and the number of breastfeedings, but again, it says it was canceled, and in the current Quran, they are no longer found. There's a lot more, like another verse that I'll pull out here. So for 40 days, Allah's messenger invoked Allah to curse a couple of people that had killed some Muslims, and this verse was revealed. Later on, this verse was cancelled out, but the problem is why? Because this verse has no legal implications. It's just talking about a spiritual aspect, but it was removed. So that's really suspicious, and it's no longer found in the current Quran.
By the way, just to be clear, these hadiths that you're showing, it's missing a big part at the beginning of it, right? The original ones usually has so and so told so and so told so and so told so and so, but I think the English translation just starts with the part that the quote starts. Correct?
Yeah. If you want to look at the chain, then you can just look at the Arabic. It lists the names as well. So that in this chain, for example, it's one guy here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So about 6 people in the chain in this narration, and this isn't a narration directly from Muhammad. It's mentioning an incident way after Muhammad's death.
So isn't this excuses for these the fact that that maybe God wanted to remove it from the Quran or replace it with something else? What about that excuse?
I don't see that making sense, because when we go further, we will look in at 2 or 3 narrations where Muhammad is literally editing the Quran on the spot because he forgot to add a word and realized, oh, he made a blunder.
Oh my God.
So this concept of abrogation is basically a way to cover up and trying to legitimize the claim that Quran is Allah's word and not the work of Muhammad. So again, this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, so it's the second most authentic book, and it mentions very important things. Firstly, it says that people in Muhammad's time used to recite a chapter that was the length of chapter 9. That's about 200 verses long, approximately. But then they go on saying that they have forgotten it. The only verses they do remember is this one. The problem is this verse, or this whole surah, this whole chapter, is nowhere to be found in the Quran anymore. So if we carry on with that.
Wow, that's amazing.
This is the one about stoning the adulterers. This verse is very significant for the mere fact that you ask the question, why would God abrogate a verse but preserve the ruling in the hadith or the sunnah? Because if somebody does commit adultery, they're still supposed to be stoned to death according to traditional Muslim scholars. So why would God remove a verse but preserve it anyways? But anyways, Omar goes to a great extent to say that yes, the verse of stoning was included in the Quran. It was revealed to Muhammad. Muslim recited it, understood it, and even Muhammad, Abu Bakr, and his companions enforced this verse. And he says it is not found in the Quran anymore. And he's warning people to continue the tradition of stoning adulterers because he doesn't want people going astray. And this is the second caliph of Islam who, about Muhammad said about him that if there was a prophet after me, it would be Omar.
Wait, he said that about Omar? That's amazing.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm an ex-Shia, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Omar and Abu Bakr and Osman, they were all evil people that denied Ali his, being Imam, right? So when Muhammad was in the cave with the
Mm-hmm.
spider and stuff, it was with Abu Bakr, right? They
Yeah.
told us the story, and they never told us it was Abu Bakr because we were never supposed to know that these people did anything good.
Yeah.
So that about Omar, I didn't know. That's pretty significant. But anyway, just to answer that question, it was 20 years. Osman canonized the Quran around 20 years after Muhammad's death, and somebody is asking. I think he says he's a bit confused how the Quran was, you know, where like how before it was canonized, how was the Quran preserved? Like people memorized short sections of the Quran. I think the answer is that at that time it's the Arabs were supposed to memorize a lot of poetry. Like memorizing
Yeah.
poetry was a big thing, and people memorized big chunks of poetry, so that's how it was preserved at that time, right?
Yeah, mostly what Muhammad would, since he couldn't write or read himself, he would allegedly receive revelation from God, and he would immediately memorize it and then recite it. It was all oral tradition, and
Right,
then people around him would listen and memorize from him, and then some people would write it down on bones, pieces of skin, leather, date palm leaves, and
right.
it was about 20 years later when all of this material was put together and formed into a book.
Right, which actually that was something that was very common, right? Memorizing poetry,
Yeah,
and you didn't need to know how to read and write to memorize poetry, right?
exactly. Yeah,
So one thing I don't understand is this claim that the Quran is a miracle because Muhammad didn't know how to read and write. Yeah, well, he didn't know how to read and write, but memorizing verses was pretty common even among people that didn't know how to read and write. So where is the miracle exactly? Because he didn't write it down. He came and told Ali what to write, and Ali, who did know how to read and write, wrote it down. Ali and
yeah,
other people. So I don't understand why somebody that doesn't know how to read and write memorizing the Quran, where is the miracle in that?
yeah. It, I don't see a miracle in that at all, and it makes total sense because it wasn't only Muhammad that was coming up with these kind of revelations or verses at that time. Uh, at that time in Arabia, there was prophets popping up in literally every small town and city, and they were doing the exact same thing. One of them is Musaylama,
Right,
who was composing verses like Muhammad was on the top of his head. He didn't need to write it down. Arabs were into poetry at that time, so and reading and writing wasn't a major part of their culture, anyways. So
right.
they could definitely learn poetry, make up poetry, prose, rhyme without writing anything down.
So how is it that a lot of like people that take Islam seriously and read these hadiths, they don't like they don't question it like you? Like, do you think most of them are not just like because there's so much hadith, right? Like hadith, the amount of like you could read the Quran and but to go over all the hadiths, that's going to take a long time, right? There's way more hadiths out there than there's Quran. Is that the reason, or are people reading it and just not paying attention to this and not asking questions? Like, wouldn't anybody reading this ask themselves like, what the hell, like I thought the Quran never changed?
Exactly, and the main issue in the Muslim world is that most of this literature is preserved in Arabic, and about only 20% of Muslims actually understand Arabic. So most of the Muslims don't even understand what they believe in. They can read the Quran, they don't understand it.
Right,
Uh, so they never actually read into this stuff. And people who do find out about this they do start questioning it, like I did, and a few other of my friends do. And that's what we're trying to do, is bring this literature forward to the common Muslim who doesn't read Hadith regularly or doesn't look into Quran or the Hadith in detail.
Right. So just like, yeah, and when most people think about Islam, they think about Middle East, right?
Yeah,
And they think Arab. But the number one Islamic country, most popular Islamic country in the world is Indonesia,
yeah.
right? And I think after that is Pakistan, not
Mm-hmm.
Middle East, not Arabic, Bangladesh, not Middle East, not Arabic,
And India.
India, not Middle East, not Arabic. And then after that, I think finally we get the first Arabic one is Egypt, right? And
Yeah.
then we get Iran again. This one is Middle East, but not Arabic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people that have memorized the entire Quran and have no idea what it says,
Not
right?
even a
They just
single word.
memorize how to, yeah. So yeah, did you? But so yeah, I mean, we had to, like, even when I in school, when they made us recite the Quran, we learned how to recite it, but we rarely read the translation.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the number one problem is like in Pakistan, right? Literally everybody from childhood is taught to recite Arabic, to read it, but never taught the meaning. And people die who have memorized the Quran, but they never understand what it says. And most people don't even bother reading the book that they believe is the word of God with even a translation.
Yeah. Yeah, not yeah. Most people don't even bother reading the Arabic, but the people that most of the people that do bother reading the Arabic don't read the translation. And when you are forced to read the translation, it's usually picked and choose for you which parts of it to read, and that's part of the school curriculum, which is not like,
Yeah.
even when I became an atheist. I became an atheist not because I studied the Quran. Like, I did eventually, like, became more hardcore atheist because of that.
Mhm.
But my main path to atheism was first through doubting God, right? And then
Mhm.
I met other people who were doubting Islam, but their path was mostly through studying the Quran. And when they brought these verses to me, even as a non-Muslim at that time, I was like, no, that's not in the Quran.
Yeah. Like a
And
jump.
I feel like, even as an non-Muslim, like, are you serious? Like, no. And then I went and picked it up, like, holy shit, that's in the fucking Quran. Like,
Yeah.
like this book was next to me all my life, and I never knew that this was in it. Like, do people know? Like, this is, why do people not open this and just read it? It's right fucking there. It's right next to you. It's telling you that you could have sex. Okay, this is not. You could have sex with the wives of people that you captured in battle. It says it right there. Like, holy,
And their
like,
husbands are still alive.
yeah, because actually the verse starts like this. The verse is like, you can't have sex with a married woman, of course, except, like, what? Except, like, so you could have sex with a woman that is already married. Like, what could it possibly be that makes that
Yeah.
okay? And then if you captured them in the war against the enemies of Allah, like, holy fuck, these are, like, they're treating women like this is not like these Quranists, Western Quranist people that say, like, oh, ignore the hadith, just focus on the Quran. Well, this is in the fucking Quran, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
It pisses me off, right? But somebody is asking. This is a little bit different from what we're talking about. We'll get back to this. But somebody is asking, what do you think about Sufi Muslims?
Sufi Islam is a more tolerant version, more peace loving, more music, dancing.
But
So
still bullshit.
yeah, definitely. The source is the same, right? The book is the same, the basic tenets are the same, the sources are the same.
The thing I have with problem with Sufi Islam is that it seems all nice and, lovey dovey and not very barbaric and not much blood and killing, but it's still, you know revering this book that is
Hmm.
asking for us to do all those things, right?
Yeah.
um, and it also still is promoting just emotionally believing in things, even if it makes no fucking sense. You know what I mean? And I mean, it was Ghazali that brought the Islamic world back away. Ghazali was Sufi, right?
Um,
Um, was he?
sorry, go
Wasn't
on.
he? Yeah, and it was his fault that like the whole Islamic world walked away from rationalism, right? Like his ideas against philosophers and
Hmm.
against logical thinking
Yeah.
was mostly done by this fucking Sufi. It was a Persian Sufi. Yep, yeah, it was him. Yeah, it was a mystic. He was a Sufi, and I think it was mostly his war against philosophers and
Mhm.
rationalists
Yeah.
um, to that brought the is like that gave what like eventually destroyed anything that was like resembling to a there used to be a surgeon like people like moving away from theological thinking and focusing more on rationality in the Islamic world and science, and he came along and he said like no, fuck all that,
Hmm.
uh, you know this is not how you gain truth, and he became very popular, and I think
Yeah.
he started all this. So yeah, and the thing is that even if Sufism directly is not advocating for violence, is still promoting, is still anti-rationality and anti-rational, and being anti-rational, being anti-logic could could maybe sometimes ends up leads you to peaceful
Hmm.
conclusions, but sometimes it also leads you to very dangerous conclusions. This is random. When you walk away from rationality and logic, results may vary, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so going back to the Quran, do you know the story of the goat, right? The goat eating
Yeah.
the verse. So what's
Yeah.
that? Can you tell us about that?
So the verse is about breastfeeding. Um, were on this piece of paper with Aisha, and she was mourning Muhammad's death, and so a sheep snuck in the in her house and ate that piece of paper that had the Quranic verses on it. So the verses have been permanently lost. It had the verses of stoning and breastfeeding
That
on it.
was the verses of that was the one that the so actually that goat saved a lot of people, mostly women, I think. All
Yeah.
right. so, so, wow, thank you, goat. Whoever you, yeah, wow. So a lot of people that have not been stoned were lucky that a goat ate. Yeah, wow, amazing.
Well, I
So
mean,
yeah,
the the punishment for adultery is still stoning in Sunni Islam because they still derive it from the Hadith, which Muhammad still said that yeah, stone people to death. Which I
yeah,
mean,
but it
it's
would
been
probably be
banned.
more of it if it was still in the Quran, right?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So um, so not the goat. She didn't save everybody, but she saved a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
I'm assuming her gender. Um, so about the Quran itself, right? So Muslims believe the Quran was revealed to Muhammad and he wrote it down. It's a direct word of God. And actually, the Quran was not created at the time of Muhammad. The Quran existed independent of time, right?
Hmm.
So the Quran existed all the time. It was just revealed to Muhammad when Muhammad came. But there's a copy of the Quran in heaven, which is the original copy.
Hmm.
And these Qurans that we have is just a copy of the original copy in heaven, and that
Yeah.
that version was there when Jesus was here, when Adam was here, like it was there before even the universe was freaking created. The Quran
Yeah.
still existed, right?
Yeah.
um, and we're talking when we're talking about the Quran, most Muslims don't know we're not talking about all the vowels and all the dots. The part of the Quran which is the holy, the sacred part of the Quran is just everything except the dots and the vowels and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that that part of the Quran is the uncreated word of God, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
That means that it's the only thing in the world that God didn't create, right?
Hmm.
Which existed with God at all time and all places,
Yeah.
which kind of contradicts one of the most fundamental, actually the most fundamental core beliefs in Islam, which is the Tawheed, right?
Yeah.
Which is there's only one thing in the world which is divine, not Muhammad, not anything, not anyone, not any items. It's just God, right? Allah is the only divine thing. But one thing that the Mu'tazilites, which was some other philosophers, they're like, okay, the Quran can't be uncreated word of God because now we have two things in the world which are divine. One is the Quran and one God, and that goes against the Tawheed. So
Yeah,
they believed that no, the Quran is the created word of God, but they all got killed and destroyed. Now they don't exist anymore, right? So now the belief is that the Quran was the uncreated word of God, which is somehow a contradiction to Tawheed, right? Is it
definitely. And it's also the literal speech of God. It's not
right?
just written words, it's what God spoke to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. So once you say there's literal speech, you're left with very little room for variations in the text.
So what's the difference between saying the word of God and saying like like these are so what's the main difference, like people, for people to understand the significance of this?
So, for example, the Bible, right? Christians claim that it's the word of God, but they don't say it's the literal speech of God. They say that it's the inspired word of God that was written down over a long period uh, through men.
Right.
When it comes to the Quran, it is Allah literally speaking to Muhammad through the angel. And when you read the Quran, you see that it sounds more like a conversation between Allah and Muhammad all the time.
Right. It's not like God is speaking to you. It seems like you just walked into a conversation between two people, which is between God and Muhammad. It's not
Yeah,
directly like, "Hey, Muhammad, tell people to say this," and so it's just
yeah,
between two people talking. That's the whole Quran, right? Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Right, but and that's why the Quran means a lot to people. So when you're looking at the verses Quran, this is why it's Quran is so significant, because these are the spoken words of God. This is why even to this day, as an ex-Muslim, I have a problem touching the verses of the Quran without wuzu. Right, wuzu is like the Islamic washing, the blessing that you get. That, and you're not supposed to touch the words of God if you don't have the wuzu on. And even to this day, like I open the Quran, I still touch the edges, and I sometimes have to remind myself, like, what the fuck are we touching? Like I touch it, like no, touch it, it's okay. Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird, but also, we were told like, so God Himself never directly spoke to Muhammad, correct? Like it always went God to Gabriel
Yeah,
or Jabril, and Gabriel to Muhammad. There was
yeah,
no verse that went directly from God to Muhammad, right?
yeah,
Right, because we're told if God speaks to a mountain, that mountain will just melt. That's what
yeah.
we were told. So that's why you can't have a direct conversation between God and Muhammad. So, but there were some verses that apparently weren't, that Muhammad said that these are the Quran, and then later, like, no, sorry, that was the devil, right?
Yeah, that was the incident of satanic verses, and that's a really interesting one because the incident is found in all the earliest sources of Islam, all the early Sirah books, the earliest ones, right? Even before the Hadith were compiled. And the incident goes that Muslims are being tortured in Mecca, and Muhammad, wanted his followers to, not be tortured. So he wanted to please the Meccans. So one day, the chiefs of the Meccan, the pagans, were sitting around the Kaaba, and Muhammad was there too. And he started reciting this surah called Surah Najm, or the Stars, the 53rd chapter of the Quran, I believe. And he got to a verse where it mentions that the names of the three goddesses of the pagans. And it ended up, Muhammad recited that those are the high flying cranes whose intercession Allah accepts.
Yeah.
So at the end, all the pagans and the Muslims fell on the ground and prostrated, and the Meccans were happy that Muhammad has accepted their deities as worthy of something, and they were going around being jubilant.
Yeah. So finally, Muhammad is recognizing our gods,
Yeah.
right?
So then a few of his followers were like, he's been telling us monotheism, monotheism.
Yeah. La
We've been
ilaha
tor-
illallah, right?
yeah, and we've been tortured for that, and now he's kind of recognizing their deities. And then suddenly, Gabriel comes to Muhammad, tells him, "Oh, it's Satan who put those words on your tongue. It wasn't me." And then he gave him the correct version, which speaks badly of the Meccan gods. So then the Meccans became angry and they started saying, "Oh, Muhammad is a liar. Muhammad is a liar. He's making all this up." And
So
yeah, go on.
so Muhammad basically said, I mistook. The devil came and told me something, and he made it seem like how that he was God, like he was Gabriel, but it wasn't Gabriel. I was tricked, right?
Yeah,
And which if my question to Muslims is, if Muhammad is capable of being tricked by the devil or Iblis, right? If that's possible, then it's possible that the whole Quran was a trick by the devil, isn't it? Right?
definitely.
What makes you not think? Or how can we be sure? Like, if you believe like all that crap, that another religion is true, and this whole thing is just the devil trying to move you away from the true religion, because he himself admitted that he was capable of being tricked by the devil.
Not only he admitted, the Quran admits it too, and it's still found in the current Quran. It's Surah 22, verse 52, and it says, "And we did not send before you any messenger or prophet except that when he spoke or recited, Satan threw into it.
Mm.
But Allah abolishes which Satan throws in, then Allah makes precise his verses, and Allah is knowing and wise."
He keeps mentioning other prophets every time he's like, yeah, you're like, hey, how come you were tricked? And he always like, other prophets were tricked too, it wasn't
Yeah,
just me.
yeah,
Right? So I think, if all of any of this is true, I don't know how much of it is true. It seems like he was like, the Meccans were like, come on, Muhammad, this is a we accept every religion. People come from all around the world, they bring their gods, and we accept their gods. You're just different because you're just saying only my God is okay. We all accept your God, just you accept our gods too, and we'll accept your God, and we could all live happily together, right?
yeah,
And Muhammad was kind of like, okay, fine, my God is okay, your guys are okay too. And then like, yeah, and then people are like, oh, okay, great, now we could all live with peace next to each other. And then Muhammad changed his mind, like, no, I made a mistake, right? Just
mhm,
my God only, right? So he was not, he was, yeah. So um and then people are like, okay, fuck, Muhammad, you said. So first, when he said that, these Meccan people actually started praying to his God, right? They're like,
yeah,
okay, because you accepted our God, we'll pray to your God too. So everybody was happy, but then he went
mhm,
and ruined it, right?
yeah,
But it's interesting how these verses, like when you read the Quran and the story around it, it seems like these verses came down exactly when it was convenient for
yeah,
Muhammad, right? Like when he saw, his adopted son's wife, and
yeah,
he got attracted to her. But the problem is that you can't really like, you can't, if he divorced her, like Zayd, right?
yeah,
Zayd, so he came to Zayd's house and he saw Zayd's wife half naked, and he was like, he went home. He was very distressed, like, because he was attracted to her, and Zayd's wife told Zayd that, hey, Muhammad came and this happened, and Zayd went to Muhammad. He's like, hey, don't worry, I don't even like her. If you want her, you can have her, right? I divorced her, and
yeah,
he'll be yours. But Muhammad didn't like that because Zayd was his adopted son, right? And
yeah,
that would be considered incest, right? So conveniently, a verse came down that said your adopted sons, they're not really your sons, right? So up to that day, Zayd was called Zayn ibn Muhammad, right? And
yeah,
then after that, his name was changed, right?
yeah,
So, and this is why in a lot of countries, Islamic countries, adoption is a big problem, right? Because it's not recognized, and is because of this, because Muhammad wanted to have sex with this woman, so
yeah.
adoptions all of a sudden became not a thing anymore, right? So because he didn't want to commit incest.
I just want to read that verse out to people. It's chapter 33. It's verse 37, and it's the way it sounds is hilarious. "And remember, O Muhammad, when you said to the one on whom Allah bestowed favor, and you bestowed favor, quote, keep your wife and fear Allah, unquote." So basically, Allah is Muhammad told Zayd, his adopted son, to keep your wife. Then Allah goes on to say, while you concealed within yourself that which Allah is to disclose, and you feared the people, while Allah has more right that you fear Him. So when Zayd had no longer any need for her, that is the girl, Zainab, we made her to you in order that there not be upon the believers any discomfort concerning the wives of their adopted sons, when they no longer have need of them. And ever is the command of Allah accomplished.
I mean, and imagine seems very specific, right? Just
Yeah.
because Muhammad was very attracted to this girl, and we are to believe that these verses about this specific incident is
Mhm.
existed in heaven before Muhammad at
Yeah.
all time in history, because because it's so important that Muhammad really wanted to have sex with this woman, right?
Yeah.
And this is, oh my god, and this is the book that's supposed to have a copy in heaven, which was there for all time and all place. Oh my god. And another convenient situation was when Aisha apparently was supposed to have sex with this guy that found her, right, okay, so this is actually the main story that divided the Shia Sunni, right?
Mhm.
So do you know which story I'm talking about, the necklace thing? That so Aisha, um, what was they were coming from a war or something, the caravan, but
Mhm.
Aisha gets off the camel to go take a dump. But then when she comes back, she realizes that her necklace is missing, and this is the necklace that Muhammad gave it to her as a gift. So it was her favorite necklace. So she goes back to look for it, but
Mhm.
because she's so tiny, they pick up that whatever thing they carried her in, and they go, and they don't even recognize that it's lighter,
Yeah.
right? So they just leave, right? And she comes back and she's like, holy shit, everybody's left and I'm left alone in the middle of the desert. But apparently it was very slow too, so she could have just walked towards her, but she was like a spoiled brat, so she was like, I'm the wife of the fucking prophet, I'm not going to walk, I'm going to sit here until they come pick me up. So
Yeah.
just sat there, but they kept on going. They didn't recognize that she was missing. So she just sits there alone, and then the one guy that was left behind from the caravan, he comes over and he's like, "Holy shit! The wife of the prophet is just sitting here,"
Mhm.
and he was like, "I'm not going to leave her alone here." So he she picks her up and puts her on a camel and catches up with the caravan. But when he gets there, people see that this random guy with the wife of the prophet on the camel coming, and it looks really bad. So people start
Yeah.
saying that they had sex, right?
Yeah.
And this whole thing gets everywhere, and like people start rumors and everything. And Muhammad gets very embarrassed, and he doesn't see her for a very long time, so he doesn't even visit. And Aisha always crying, why is Muhammad not visiting me?
Mhm.
Why? And everybody keeps talking, and Muhammad is very distressed, especially because he really likes Aisha. But then he had the meeting with Ali and Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr, remember, he eventually becomes the first Khalifa, and Ali becomes the fourth Khalifa. And this is why. Because at this meeting, Ali says that, Muhammad, you're the prophet of God. This is embarrassing. Just fucking divorce her and get a new
Mhm.
wife. You could have anyone you want, right?
Yeah.
And Abu Bakr is Aisha's father. And
Yeah.
he's sitting there and he's like, hello, I'm here. You're, I'm right here. I can hear you. And
Mhm.
this is where the divide between Abu Bakr and Ali starts. This is the divide between Aisha and Ali starts. This is why we have the war of the red camel between Aisha and Ali, which I
Mhm.
never understood how Sunnis talk about this, because for us, Ali is the good guy and Aisha is the bad person, right? So we always like, okay, we're on Ali's side, but for Sunnis, both Ali are good and Aisha are supposed to be good too. So
Mhm.
I never understood how they, like, for you, you were Sunni, right?
Yeah.
So for you guys, this war between Aisha, the mother of all faithful, and Ali, the fourth Khalifa, how could they both be correct? And like, how did you guys explain this war between these two people?
Well, the story we remember is that, at least as taught in school by my Islamic studies teacher, that both of them were right. And what Ali did in the war was he didn't want to hurt Aisha, And they say, some of them say that Aisha was young, so she was manipulated into fighting Ali. But during the war, Ali came and he cut off the legs apparently of the
Yes.
camel, so the camel fell, and the followers of Aisha thought that she's either dead or she's been taken hostage, so they surrendered. Whereas Ali had just like cut off her camel because he didn't want to hurt her, but still then wanted to end the war. That's the story I've been told.
Right. Yeah, I've been told. I mean, I heard the same story, but where this comes, but the Quran comes is Muhammad's solution. Muhammad didn't take Ali's advice.
Mhm.
Muhammad came up with his own solution. Again, Muhammad has this, you know, get out of jail free card,
Allah.
which is which is God, right? Every time he needs something, God all of a sudden comes out with a verse. So
Mhm.
his solution was that, oh, I have a verse coming. I can feel a verse coming now, right about now,
Yeah.
and and a verse comes, and God says that Aisha is innocent, and if anybody wants to prove somebody committed adultery, they need four
Well,
witnesses. And if you can't bring four witnesses, you should be punished. If whoever said that, whoever is saying that the crime happened and they can't alleging a crime, but they can't have the witnesses, they're the one that should be punished, right?
mhm.
And so everybody shut the fuck up. My wife is innocent, and if you keep talking, you'll be punished. And this is God saying. God is saying my. And Aisha was surprised. Aisha is like, I didn't know I'm so important that God is going to bring a verse down for
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
Um, so well, because Aisha was important to Muhammad, that's why it was. You know, that's why all of a sudden God. So but this kind of shows like every time Muhammad needs something, like people talk rude to Muhammad, and verse came down, don't talk to your prophet like this, right?
Yeah. Don't
Every
raise
time.
your voices in front of him.
Yeah. uh, okay, so and this verse actually caused a lot of problems in modern day times, right?
Mhm.
Because now women go and say like, hey, I was raped, and people like, okay, give us the witnesses,
Mhm.
and you're supposed to have four witnesses. Like
That's if
how?
they're for men.
Oh yeah, and they have to be four men. So even if you bring four women, that's so. But how often could you provide like yeah, four people were just watching me being raped. Here are four witnesses, right? Like
It's
it's
impractical.
yeah, you can't, you're not going to be able to provide. So you're going to go to the police, like in Pakistan, like this
Mhm.
happens, right? You go to the police and say I was raped. You can't produce four witnesses, so guess what happens? You get arrested for because you just admitted adultery, and you can't prove that it was rape. So
Yeah.
so you now you get screwed over twice, because first you were raped, and now you're arrested for adultery because you just admitted adultery. And what's the punishment for that?
For adultery, it's stoned to death.
Right. So if you go and report a crime that you were raped, you get stoned to death for adultery,
Yeah.
which which is, a lot of people, when they look at the Quran, they think like, what was Muhammad's plan? What did he wanna what did he like? So people that are pro-Islam and anti-Islam, they both look at this wrong, right? The people that are pro-Islam think that these verses were a genius way for us to make have the best way of living, right? And a lot of people that are anti-Islam think that Muhammad was this evil mastermind that was planning to dominate the world. He was just trying to make it the best situation for himself. Like I
Yeah.
didn't think he predicted today's world. Like I don't think like people like, oh, he bring this verse so that he could do. No, he was just looking at that situation at that specific time. He wasn't planning not only 10 years down the road. Forget 1,000 years down the
Mhm.
road. Like how Trump is right now. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He just says things just to get out of a situation at
Really
that specific
short-sighted.
time. He was very
Yeah.
short-sighted. These are how the verses worked for Muhammad.
I'll show like this part of the Quran which was literally being edited on the spot, and it's been captured beautifully in the Hadith book. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay.
So this is from Sahih al-Bukhari, the most authentic book of Hadith.
What was the guy that you said the second most authentic?
That is Sahih Muslim.
Sahih Muslim.
Yeah.
Right. Wait. So okay. Okay. Yeah.
So this this narration is interesting because a verse is revealed to Muhammad, and Muhammad says to bring, an ink pot, a bone to write it on, and then he had the verse written down on that bone. And while this verse was being written down, this blind man was sitting behind Muhammad, and he says, "Oh, what about me?" So Muhammad, on the spot, says, "Oh, Allah revealed and changed it a little and said and added the word who are disabled by injury." So you can clearly see he just came up with a verse, and then he realized, oh, he need to add more to it. He just edited it on the go.
Oh.
And there's another one that's very similar. Is this one? It's again from Sahih Bukhari, which is an authentic book. So the following verse about eat and drink until the white thread appears to you, distinct from the black thread. The current Quran has the words "and of dawn" in it, which were initially not revealed as this narration states. And then obviously this caused massive confusion because people weren't that smart. They actually started tying threads to their legs. And then Allah had to jump in again to edit it slightly so they'll understand the words "off dawn," and they were revealed later. So you can clearly see Muhammad is editing the Quran on the go as he sees fit. And if he finds a mistake in his own concoction, he doesn't feel ashamed to correct it and say, "Oh, Allah abrogated it and fixed it for me."
This is so interesting because if they existed before Muhammad and the Quran was the same throughout time, why wasn't the correction already revealed at why did it have to be added later? Like this makes no sense.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like Muhammad is sitting there, a guy is sitting behind him. Oh, and then the guy's like, "Oh, right, hey, I'm still here." And the guy's like, "Oh, sorry." Like, so you kind of think, did Allah forget that blind man sitting behind Muhammad, so he had to send Gabriel a second time to send the revelation again?
That's crazy. Make okay, so we have to show this to as many people as possible because I think this will make like even Muslims because that take these I think that hadith seriously. I think they will
Yeah.
start. This is the best way. I think what you found is the best way to make people start doubting these things because these are not stuff that you're making up. This is people can now. What's the website that you're using actually for anybody that wants to check this? Because the website that you're using also have the if people don't trust the website because some people are like, oh, this is a Jewish website or something like that, right? So
It's
yeah,
sunnah.com. It's spelled Sunnah.
right.
And
But yeah, go on.
it's got a lot of hadith books, all the six major books, plus it's got a couple of extra books in there. And after every hadith, it has a classification of it that if it's authentic, if it's
Right.
not
Can you share your
authentic.
screen again? So for people that want to verify that these are actual Sahih hadiths, like
Yeah, definitely.
because at the bottom of it, it actually shows. Okay, say something because here, let me just.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
so
oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so see at the bottom here, yeah, it says if anybody thinks that this website is a Jewish conspiracy, you could go and check that. You could check these, Sahih al Bukhari, go see if it's actually there or not, right?
yeah,
And what do you say to people that the Quranists? Well, we already kind of responded to them that if you're a Quranist, then most of Islam doesn't make any sense, right? And just to be clear, the Quranists are a very, very, very fringe group of people that believe that you don't need the hadith, right? Like these are not like some people make it seem like, oh, you only need the Quran, right?
mhm,
And some people in the West were like, okay, just look at the Quran only, don't look at the hadith. But they don't understand that in most of like 99% of Muslims think that you have to take that you need to look at the hadith, right?
yeah.
But even for that tiny fringe majority that are called Quranists, which are people that only look at the Quran and not the hadith, what would you argue against them?
Well, firstly, I would say is uh, how do you understand how to pray if you don't want to read the hadith. How do you pay zakah? How do you go for the pilgrimage? What percentage of money you pay for the charity? Uh, so many details that are missing in the Quran that you can never understand. How many prayers are there? Because the Quran only mentions three,
Right.
right? And the second point is which Quran? Because I have multiple variations of the Quranic text uh, as how it's mature. Like there's right now in the Muslim world, you can find up to at least about 14 different Qurans.
Are you are you serious? In the
Yeah.
how is it 14? I did not know this. How do you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way the Quran has been related to us is through reciters and oral tradition. And in Muslim tradition, oral tradition has the upper hand rather than the manuscripts. Now, there's let's say seven reciters, main reciters that have two students each, and then they recite and pass on the Quran, which now we have written down. And there's versions of the Quran. The current Quran that is the most popular one is called the Hafs Quran. It was only canonized in 1924. Bear in mind that scholars say that all of these Qurans are equally authentic and equally valid.
What are the difference between them? Is it just like a vowel here and there, or like?
There's actually words missing, extra letters being added. Sometimes the meaning does also change, and I'll actually show a few right now.
By the way, while you get that, I also want to say one thing I tell to the people Quranists, which I don't want to give them too much. Like I don't want people to understand that these are very fringe group of people, the Quranists. I also want to tell them that the Quran itself says that you should follow the way of Muhammad.
Yeah,
How are you supposed to do that if you don't know what Muhammad said and did? Like how, like you need the hadith to be able to follow this commandment of God, which is follow the way of Muhammad, correct?
yeah, definitely. There's so many verses in the Quran saying that obey the Prophet, and if you love Allah, you have to obey Muhammad. So,
Wait, is that the really a different? What is? Are you serious? Is that two
yeah,
difference?
yeah, that's one of them. I have about like 40 of these on my profile on Facebook. You can go check it out. You can even verify this. There's a website called QuranFlash.com.
That's a
And,
huge difference.
oh, there's more. There's great variations that normal Muslims don't know about. All the academic scholars are well aware of this, but they don't tell it to the Muslims because it goes against the claim. It makes the claim of the literal speech of God sound bad.
Wow.
So here, this whole word's missing huwa, which means he,
Yeah.
which, and let's go to the next picture. Some of them are just vowel differences like yaktulun and yuqatilun.
Why will I forgive? Because vowels were not in the original
Yeah.
version, right?
وَكُتُبِهِ, كِتَابِهِ, the plural singular problem. Again, kuffar means many non-believers. Kafir means one non-believer.
Right.
See an extra letters added in this one. It's missing in the second one.
Okay, that's a big one because that's part that the letter is an original part, is supposed to be original part of the. Like I can't imagine. If this is shocking to me because I did not know there's these variations. Like, are both of these like is one of them very common and one of them just a fringe, or both of them are widely in circulation?
Well, so basically the Quran has different versions, which are called the Hafs version, which is the most popular one. And the second most popular is the Warsh version. And there's others, Duri Quran, Susi, Khalaf. Uh, it goes on. The list keeps going on.
Okay.
But there's seven with total of 14 that are considered more authentic, and they're all equally authentic. And what Muslims are told is the current Quran that they follow is just the Hafs Quran. The other Qurans are still being used in the Muslim world. You can actually go to an Islamic bookstore and still buy them. Like some Qurans, for example, I believe the Warsh Quran is normally used in Northern Africa. I think the Duri Quran is in the eastern part of the world. It varies slightly from which region you're in.
So somebody's asking if the Muhammad edited the Quran, it cannot be the complete word of God. No, because God doesn't make mistakes, right?
Yeah,
Um, before, okay, so I'm gonna before right at the end, I'm gonna ask you how can people reach out to you? Is that okay? Or
yeah,
find?
definitely.
All right. So, but one thing else, because we're almost running out of time. But one thing else I just want to go over with you is the zaraba, the verse that where the wife beating is allowed, right?
Yeah.
So that verse, let me just that's a verse that apparently the story is that Muhammad didn't want that to be true. Like he didn't want to allow men to beat their wife, but then he said like it's not me, right? Like it's God, right? So it was like his so he was basically trying to blame it on God, right? But
Yeah.
the verse is telling men that if your wives are being disobedient, right? First of all,
Mhm.
it mentions that men are supposed to be in charge of women, and then
Yeah.
it mentions that if your wife is not listening to you, first, um, don't talk to her for a while, right?
Hmm.
Then, um, kick
Separate
her
them,
out,
but
yeah, kick her out of your bed, or deny her sex, which I
hmm
don't know. It's if it's a big punishment for some people or not. I don't, but then the last is that the third one, right?
yeah,
Third, if she's still disobedient, right, is you're supposed to beat her. It's not, and
yeah,
it's not saying it's not suggesting that um, you can beat her. It's saying you should beat her,
yeah.
right? So and so the excuse, this is a big deal because it's not in the it's very embarrassing in the modern world for this to be an Islamic teaching, and it's not a hadith, it's a Quranic verse, right?
Hmm.
And it seems pretty obvious about what it's saying, but I hear excuses. The excuses is like, okay, there's hadith that Muhammad said you have to beat them with a toothbrush or something as small as a
Hmm.
toothbrush. No, but I don't know why God does. Even if that's true, that's still horrific. That you are even demeaning women to that position.
Yeah.
But and even if that's true, why didn't God mention that in the Quran? So that men don't start beating up their wife like crazy,
Hmm.
right? And then I hear, well, disobedience. It's not everything is a disobedience. Like you can't just beat your wife because she's not washing your dishes. Yeah, it's supposed to be like infidelity or something like that. Like, okay, well, it doesn't. First of all, that still doesn't make it okay. You can't beat somebody because they cheated on you.
Yeah.
Second of all, again, the Quranic verse doesn't mention anything like that. Third excuse I heard is that this word zaraba doesn't even mean. This is very new, by the way. These
Hmm.
excuses didn't exist until the modern world come up with better standards of morality.
Yeah.
For 1400 years, this verse exactly meant beat your wives until we became more civilized and we're like, yeah, that's not cool. And now all of a sudden, Muslims have discovered, some Muslims, mostly Western Muslims, minority of Muslims, have discovered that all these scholars for 1400 years were wrong, and this word means walk towards to, which anybody that understands Arabic knows that it doesn't mean that, right? Because it's very clear what it means, like if within the context, right? Within, do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, the Quran gives three options for women that are disobedient to their husbands, and says you talk to them separate in bed, and then the word is used wadribuhun, that you hit them or you beat them. Uh, Issue is when you go to the Sunnah, right, like the Hadith, you actually see that women were being beaten, and there's incidents where Muhammad is sitting around his wife. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari as well, and his wives are asking for money, and Abu Bakr comes in. Muhammad laughs and says, and then Abu Bakr literally slaps Aisha on the face. Then Omar comes, slaps his daughter, who's married to Muhammad, on the face, and Muhammad is laughing. It's normal. And then there's other incidents where Aisha is sitting and Muhammad is sleeping in her with his head in her lap, and Abu Bakr came to Aisha and was mad at her because she had the whole caravan delayed because she forgot something, and he punched her in the chest, to which Aisha says that it caused me significant
So
pain.
Muhammad punched. This was Muhammad, right?
No, no, Muhammad was sleeping in Aisha's lap. Abu Bakr came to Aisha and
But I
punched.
heard a story when Muhammad punched Aisha. Oh, that's a different story.
That's a different one.
Okay, yeah.
That happened when Muhammad snuck out at night by himself and went to the graveyard, and Aisha followed him and came back first. But she was young and she couldn't hide that she actually followed him. So he caught the lie and he kind of pushed her or punched her, and it caused her pain in the chest.
And this is Sahih as well?
Yeah, this is all Sahih.
Oh my God. All right. So Muhammad himself beat up his wife.
Yeah.
So okay, but the verb, there's root verb, is that the three word root of
Darab.
that verb is zaraba, right?
Yeah.
I think if it was supposed to be walking towards too, it would be like aina after it or something like that,
Mhm.
right? So because it's not there, it clearly means hitting, right? Like anybody that knows Arabic clearly can see that this means hitting, right? So this is
Yeah.
just an excuse to Westerners who don't know Arabic that hoping that they won't check to see like, oh, this means something else, but it's pretty clear what it means, right? And especially the hadith around that, uh, even the hadith that says with a toothbrush makes it
Mhm.
clear that this is about hitting, because you can, if it's with a toothbrush, it's not about walking towards to, right? It's like, how do we hit them? It's like with something as small as a toothbrush. How does that make sense if it's about walking towards somebody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the punishment is getting supposed, yeah, anyways. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and the excuses are pretty ridiculous. Um, but yeah, so if a Muslim is listening to this and they're shocked, and they don't believe you and think that you're part of devil's plan to cast doubt in their minds,
Or I'm a Jewish agent or something.
yeah, you're hired by Israel to weaken the ummah. So what what do you suggest them to go? What resources do you suggest them to go check? Islamic sources, right? To go check for them to verify these things themselves.
Yeah. So firstly, I'd start by saying that Muslims who are proud of the Quran and defend it, I would ask them to please read it with the translation, try to understand it, uh, read Life of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq, the first ever book written about Muhammad's life. It is the, let's say, more closer to the truth because it's more closer to the original source, and it will show you the reality of Muhammad. Uh, Also, don't just stick to just pro-Islamic sites or pro-Islamic material. Try to read criticism, because if you actually believe your religion is from God, then you shouldn't be scared. And try to look at things from a skeptical point of view, because if you're actually out there searching for the truth, this you have to do this one thing: is be unbiased and look at the material, look at the evidence and the understanding, and let it guide you to the conclusion. Don't presuppose that Islam is from God and then work your way downwards. Because what you end up doing is you start molding all these hadiths and these narrations that look bad to you, and you try to rationalize what they call rationalizing insanities. Try to be objective. Uh, start scrutinizing Islam. The same zeal of evidence you ask for, suppose the theory of evolution to be true, put that same zeal, that same keenness for evidence for Islam. Uh, have a set standard for understand what is right and what is wrong.
That is great advice. And one thing you mentioned, which is so true, is that if you have a conclusion already in mind, everything you read and everything that goes against it you will see as foolish, and everything that even slightly supports it you see as credible, like that. But if you already set on a conclusion, whatever you read, you'll always be biased. Try to put that destination, see where evidence takes you, instead of having a conclusion already in mind.
Yeah.
If your religion is true, you will end up to that conclusion already. So there you have nothing to fear, right? Try to wipe out everything you know and see, like, if I didn't know anything and I was looking as researching this from the beginning, if I wasn't born a Muslim in an Islamic society, if I was looking at evidence, honestly, where would I land? Look at it without any bias. See, try to, don't look at it and like, let me read this to confirm the things that I already believe in. See if you, and if your belief is true, you'll land on those. But look at everything and see if you could analyze everything without a bias. That's a great advice.
Definitely, definitely.
So before we go, if people want to reach out to you and come see the posts that you make on Facebook, how can they find you? Do you have like Twitter or anything?
I don't have Twitter. I'm only on Facebook,
Facebook,
but
okay.
people are more than welcome. I have my profile public. They can come follow me. They can add me as a friend. I'll just give you a link so you
Can
can.
I, yeah, send me a link. I'll link to it in the description. I'm gonna work on the cover of this video, so it's gonna like maybe later tonight or something. But I'll make sure that, okay, that's I already have you as a friend on Facebook, so I'll just link to it on in the description so people could come reach out. And that's okay for people to come reach out to you.
Definitely, no
You,
issues at all.
you should start making your own YouTube series, man. You should go like I would watch those.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it. It's in the works, and I'm gonna
Yeah,
start with the basics. Start with the Quran, criticize it, analyze it, then move to the Hadith, and then other topics. Yeah,
yeah, that would, let me know. I will post that on Atheist Republic. You have very good insight. I mean, I learned a lot. So thank you so
Thank-
much for doing this. Yeah.
no worries.
I
You're
appreciate.
welcome.
And even if you save one person from Islam, you basically saved a life from delusion, which is like you gifted somebody with reality if you could do that. So
Yeah,
amazing work. All right. Okay. Thank you, man. I'm gonna stay.
it was awesome.
Yeah. And also, by the way, if you start a YouTube channel, let me know so I could add it to the description here. So if people find this later, they could find your YouTube channel as well. All right.
Definitely.
But
It was
I'm gonna stop the broadcast, but stay on because we're still gonna be on after I stop the. By the way,
okay.
anyway, everybody in the live chat, especially Beej, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for the questions. And yeah, all right. And also Jeff, thank you. All right, and Sal. All right, okay. Stop the broadcast.